They took her voice, but they couldn't take her song. Now she sings inside my bones, a melody that erases the world, one note at a time. My name is Silas, and this is not a warning. It is an epitaph for a world that is about to go quiet. I was the lookout who escaped. She was the one who took my place. She ignored my rules, and now something unexplainable doesn't just visit her at night. It is composing its masterpiece, and her soul is the instrument. My world is six-sided, padded, and silent. The walls are covered in dark grey acoustic foam, sculpted into wedges that seem to drink the very concept of sound. They devour echoes, they starve reverberations. There is no ambient noise here, no hum from a refrigerator, no distant traffic, no sigh from the wind. This is an anechoic chamber, a dead room. Most people can't stand to be in a place like this for more than a few minutes. The absolute silence makes them hear the rustle of their own clothes, the wet click of their blinking eyes, the rushing thunder of blood pumping through their own ears. The silence forces them to turn inward, and they are terrified by the noise they find there. For me, this silence is not a void. It is a shield. It is the only thing that keeps the memory of the other noise at bay, the noise that hides beneath the skin of the world. I sit here on a simple wooden chair, the only object in the room besides the recording microphone in front of me. I speak in a near whisper because even my own voice feels like a violation of this sanctuary. This recording is a penance, a confession, a final, useless attempt to map the edges of a nightmare that has no borders. It began with my failure, my cowardice. It will end with her discovery. Her name was Maya, and she was brilliant. Far too brilliant to believe in ghost stories from a rattled old man. The memory plays out in my mind, not like a film, but like a soundscape. It has texture, timbre, and a horrifying rising crescendo. It was a little over a month ago. The air in the swamp was thick and heavy, smelling of wet earth, sweet decay, and something else. Something ancient and metallic like old blood. The sun was a smear of hazy orange through the humid air as I packed the last of my personal items. The Echo watchtower stood on its spindly metal legs, 150 feet above the mire, a lonely sentinel overlooking a world of primordial green and stagnant black water. For 5 years, that tower had been my home, my laboratory, and my prison. I heard the chug of the airboat long before I saw it. It grew from a distant disturbance to a roar that sent ripples across the water and startled flocks of unseen birds into flight. When it docked at the base of the long, rick-hanging metal staircase, she climbed out. Maya. She was everything I wasn't anymore. Sharp, energetic, with a curiosity that radiated from her like heat. Her eyes, the color of dark honey, weren't just looking at the tower. They were scanning it, analyzing it, measuring its acoustic properties in her head. She carried a Pelican case that I knew held thousands of dollars in state-of-the-art recording equipment. She saw this place as a challenge, a puzzle box of unique sonic phenomena. I saw it as a tomb that hadn't yet claimed its body. "Silas, a pleasure to finally meet you in person," she said, her voice clear and confident as she reached the top platform. She didn't seem even slightly out of breath from the climb. The files don't do this place justice. The way the sound carries across the water, it's magnificent. "It has its moments," I replied, my own voice sounding rusted and dull next to hers. "Let me show you the essentials." I gave her the tour, the generator, the weather station, the comms panel, standard procedure. She nodded along, but her attention was clearly on the custom acoustic sensors I'd installed, the parabolic dishes aimed at different sections of the swamp. "You've done some impressive work here," she said, running a finger along the edge of a spectrum analyzer. "Your logs on the anomalous low-frequency resonance are what drew me to this post. The university is dying to get a clean recording." A cold dread, familiar as my own heartbeat, coiled in my stomach. "About the logs," I began, turning to face her fully. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the small cabin. "There are things you need to know, procedures that aren't in any official manual." She gave me a patient, indulgent smile, the kind a doctor gives a patient describing an imaginary illness. "I'm all ears, Silas. I'm sure this place has its quirks." "They're not quirks, Maya," I said, leaning forward, trying to force her to see the desperate sincerity in my eyes. "They are rules. You follow them, you stay sane, you break them. You don't. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone from the setting sun. Rule number 1. Between sunset and sunrise, you never ever use noise-cancelling headphones. I see you have a pair of high-end Sennheisers there. Don't use them at night, no matter how much you want to isolate a sound. The ambient noise of the swamp, the insects, the wind, it's your protection, it's a buffer. She frowned, a flicker of professional pride crossing her face. A buffer? Against what? Signal contamination? I have filters that can isolate a fly's wing beat from a mile away. Against the signal itself, I insisted. Rule number 2, your equipment is going to pick up a persistent subharmonic, probably somewhere below 20 Hz. It's an infrasound. Your logs will show it as a perfectly stable, clean sine wave. It's not geological, it's not mechanical. When you see it on the spectrogram, you turn off the main amplifier and you walk away for an hour. Don't try to boost it. Don't try to find its source. It's not a sound waiting to be heard. It's a question waiting to be asked, and you do not want to give it an answer. Her skepticism was now palpable. She folded her arms, her analytical mind already cataloguing rational explanations. Methane gas deposits, sympathetic resonance in the tower's structure. She thought I was a technician who'd gone native, a man spooked by his own equipment. And the most important rule, Maya, I said, my voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper I now live with. At some point, you'll start to hear patterns in the white noise, especially when the wind picks up. It will sound like music, like a distant choir humming a single complex chord. Your brain will tell you it's pareidolia, auditory illusion. Your instruments will tell you it's a harmonic convergence of random noise. Both will be wrong. It is a lure. It is the most dangerous thing in this entire swamp. Do not try to isolate it. Do not try to record it cleanly. Do not try to find the melody. The moment you focus on it, it focuses on you. She was silent for a long moment. She looked from me to her gleaming equipment, then out the window at the swamp, which was now sinking into a deep purple twilight. The first of the fog lights, the eerie phosphorescent phenomena known locally as will-o'-the-wisps, began to dance over the black water. "Silas," she said, her tone gentle but firm, "I appreciate the local color. Truly. It's clear you have a deep connection to this place, but I'm a scientist. I deal in data. A stable infrasound signature is a potential geological discovery. Auditory pareidolia on this scale could be a groundbreaking paper on psychoacoustics. I'm not here to listen to ghost stories. I'm here to capture the ghosts on a multi-track recorder." I knew then that I had failed. I had given her the map to a minefield, and she saw it as a treasure map. I saw the hunger in her eyes, the same hunger for knowledge, for discovery that I once had. It was that hunger that had led me to the edge. It was about to push her over it. I finished the handover in silence, packed my bag, and didn't look back as I descended the 150 steps for the last time. The airboat that had brought her was waiting to take me back to a civilization I no longer felt a part of. As we pulled away, I watched the single light of the tower cabin shrink until it was just another star in the swamp's strange firmament. I felt a profound sense of guilt, like a man who had just handed a loaded gun to a curious child. For the first few days, there was nothing. Silence on the comms. I sat in this very room, this padded cell of my own making, and I prayed. I prayed that the swamp would remain quiet, that its strange voice would stay dormant. I prayed that her superior equipment and her rational mind would somehow make her immune, that her science would be a stronger shield than my superstition. Then, on the fourth night, the radio crackled to life. It wasn't a distress call. It was a message she had recorded and sent over the secure channel. I saved it. I don't know why. Perhaps as evidence. Perhaps as a reminder of the exact moment the lock began to turn. My hand trembles as I press the play button on a small digital recorder. The sound fills the dead room, a chilling echo of her life and energy. "Silas, you are not going to believe this. I captured it. The subharmonic you warned me about. It's not 20 Hz. It's a rock-steady 18. 9 Hz, and it is the cleanest sine wave I have ever seen in a natural environment. There's no fluctuation, no decay. It's mathematically perfect. That's not possible. It has to be artificial. but the power is immense. It's not a machine. It feels biological, but on a planetary scale. I've got every sensor I have pointed at it, trying to triangulate the source now. You were right, it's not a quirk. This is a discovery. Talk soon. Triangulate the source. The foolish, brilliant, beautiful child. She thought she was an astronomer, pointing a telescope at a new star. She had no idea she was staring into the eye of a predator that had been waiting patiently in the dark, and she had just, very politely, rung the dinner bell. She wasn't triangulating the source, she was tuning herself to its frequency. She ignored my warnings. And the thing that Unexplainable visits at night, it had heard its favorite song being played, and it was coming to see who was listening. If you want to know what answered her call, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notifications. You need to bear witness to this. You need to know what happens when you try to listen to the silence. After I heard her first message, a new kind of silence settled into my padded room. It was the silence of a held breath. The silence of the moment after a stone is dropped into a bottomless well, as you wait for a splash that will never come. She had called the frequency a discovery. I knew better. You do not discover a thing like that. It discovers you. It is not a passive phenomenon waiting to be catalogued. It is a broadcast, and the message it carries is an instruction written in the fundamental language of physics, addressed not to the mind, but to the matter that builds it. Her subsequent messages, which arrived daily, became a log of her obsession. She was a master of her craft, and she applied all of her formidable skill to the task of unwrapping this sonic enigma. She stopped calling it a frequency and started calling it the signal. In her second message, she spoke of how she was using phase cancellation algorithms to digitally erase the ambient sounds of the swamp, the insects, the wind, the croaking of frogs from her recordings. She was trying to get a pure, clean sample of the choir she heard hiding within the noise. That was her second critical error. I had warned her that the ambient noise was a buffer, a shield. She saw it as interference, as static corrupting her data. She couldn't understand. That noise, that chaotic symphony of life, that was the cage. The countless competing frequencies of a living world were the bars that kept the signal contained, dissonant, and incomplete. By filtering them out, she wasn't cleaning the recording. She was meticulously filing through the bars of the cage, letting the prisoner whisper its secrets directly into her ear. By the end of the first week, her tone began to shift. The clinical excitement was being eroded by something else: confusion, a touch of frustration. "It's illogical, Silas," she said in one recording, her voice tight. "The choir melody. It has no discernible pattern, yet it feels intentional. It's not musical in any human sense. There are too many voices, hundreds of them, all singing a chord that should be hideously dissonant, but somehow it resolves. It feels complete. And the infrasound, the 18.9 Hz hum, it acts as the carrier wave. The choir is riding on top of it. Do you understand what that means? This isn't just noise. This is a broadcast. It's structured like a radio transmission." She was so close to the truth. But she was looking at it through the wrong end of the telescope. She thought she was an analyst, deciphering a signal from a distant, unknown intelligence. She was, in fact, a patient describing the progress of her own infection. The true horror began when the symptoms ceased to be purely auditory. It started subtly. I received a message from her on the 9th day. The scientific curiosity was gone from her voice, replaced by a tremor she was trying to control. "Silas, a strange question for you," the message began. "Did you ever feel a vibration in the tower? I don't mean from the wind or the generator. I mean a constant, low thrumming. I can feel it in the floorboards, in the railing. I feel it in my teeth. I've turned off every piece of equipment in the cabin, even the main breaker, but the vibration is still there. No, not there. It's in me. I feel it in my chest, a sympathetic resonance. That's not possible, is it?" I didn't answer her. What could I say? Could I tell her that I knew the feeling intimately, that for the last year of my service I felt that same thrumming in my own bones? that it was the reason I started sleeping with my hands pressed against my ribs in a futile attempt to hold myself together. The signal wasn't just a sound to be heard, it was a frequency to be felt. It had found the resonant frequency of human biology, and it was beginning to play her body like an instrument. From that point on, her reports became a terrifying medical log, disguised as scientific observation. She developed debilitating migraines. In a voice strained with pain, she described them not as simple headaches, but as structured, pulsing agony. The waves of pain, she meticulously noted, arrived in a rhythm that perfectly matched the 18.9 Hz hum. She told me she was experiencing visual auras, but they weren't the typical blotches of light. She was seeing waveforms. Glowing green sine waves burned into her vision, overlaid on the world like a heads-up display from a nightmare. The swamp itself began to respond to her focused attention. The ecosystem was sifting into a new and terrible kind of order. The will-o'-the-wisps, the ghostly lights that danced over the bog, no longer moved randomly. She sent me a short video clip. In the grainy, low-light footage, dozens of the pale, flickering orbs pulsed in unison, a silent, synchronized beat of cold light, throbbing in perfect time with the frequency she was now constantly monitoring. The flora around the tower's base started to change. She described it to me with a voice of horrified wonder. The ferns were unfurling in unnaturally perfect spirals. The moss grew in intricate, fractal patterns on the metal legs of the tower. She, with her keen, analytical mind, even gave it a name. "It's like cymatics on a biological scale," she explained, her voice trembling. Cymatics is the study of how sound vibration can manipulate matter, creating geometric patterns in sand or water. The signal was doing the same thing, but it was using living tissue as its medium. The true turning point, the moment I knew she was irrevocably lost, came 2 weeks into her stay. I received a frantic call from her over the live radio, not a recording. Her breathing was ragged. "Silas! Silas, are you there?" she gasped. "I'm here, Maya. What is it? What's wrong?" "My nose. It started bleeding in my sleep," she said, her voice cracking. "But that's not... Silas, the blood on my pillowcase, it didn't just pool, it crystallized. It dried in these perfect, tiny, six-sided patterns, like snowflakes. It's not coagulation, it's organization. The hemoglobin, it arranged itself into a geometric structure. What is doing this? What is this sound?" I had no answer. I only had my own theories pieced together in the dark. That the frequency was a catalyst, an audible entropy that didn't break things down into chaos, but rearranged them into a new alien order. It considered the chaotic, messy, beautiful complexity of life to be a form of noise. And its sole purpose was to correct that noise, to tune the world to its own terrible, simple, perfect note. The final days of that second week were a descent into a new kind of hell. She was no longer just an observer of the signal. She had become a part of its circuit. She confessed to me that she could now hear the choir without any equipment. She heard it in the whine of the wind, in the spatter of rain against the glass, in the frantic, rhythmic beating of her own heart. The barrier was gone. The world was the broadcast and she was the receiver. Then came the last message of this chapter, the one that heralded the true beginning of the end. It arrived late at night, just a short audio file. Her voice was not panicked. It was something far worse. It was a whisper of pure, unadulterated awe. "Silas, something has happened," she whispered, the sound of her own breathing loud in the recording. "I was working, analyzing the waveform of the choir. I was humming, just unconsciously, a nervous habit. And then I realized what I was humming. It was the melody, the core melody of the choir. I was humming it perfectly. My throat, it just knew the notes." She paused, and I could hear a wet, gulping sound as she tried to swallow. "But that's not it, Silas. That's not what I needed to tell you." Her voice dropped even lower, filled with a terrifying reverence. "When I hummed it, when the melody came out of me." The lights in the cabin flickered. In sync with my voice, I stopped. They stopped. I started again, a little louder. The main console, the lights on the board pulsed with every note I sang. Another pause, this one longer, heavier. I could feel her, alone in that glass box suspended over the black water, coming to a realization that would shatter her scientific world. into a million pieces. "Oh God," she breathed, the sound barely audible. "Silas, all this time, I've been trying to listen to it, to receive the signal. I was wrong, it was never about listening." Her final words hang in my silent room like a death sentence. I think it was teaching me how to broadcast. To broadcast. Such a simple, technical word. A word of dispersal, of sending a signal out from a single point to many receivers. But I understood what she truly meant. The signal was no longer an external phenomenon for her to study. It had found fertile ground in the complex biocircuitry of her nervous system, and it had rooted itself there. She hadn't just learned its song. She had become its instrument, its amplifier, its living antenna. From that moment, her communications stopped being the field notes of a scientist. They became the hymnals of a convert. She began, as any good researcher would, with an experiment. Her next transmission came 2 days later, and the change in her was profound. The fear was gone, replaced by a terrifyingly calm and methodical curiosity. She told me she had reconfigured her external sound system. The powerful speakers she had brought to project sonic pulses for geological surveys were now aimed outward at the heart of the swamp, and connected to their input was a single microphone in her cabin, her own voice. She was attempting to engage in a dialogue. She would hum the choir's melody, her melody now, into the microphone, and the speakers would boom her voice across the black water and the cypress trees. She was calling out, not for help, but for a response. She was knocking on a door that should never, ever be opened, using her own soul as her fist. For a day, nothing happened. She described the act as creating a perfect feedback loop. The swamp sang its song, she sang it back, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The vibration in her bones intensified until she felt like a tuning fork perpetually struck. She said the air in the cabin grew thick, heavy with an electrical charge that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The taste of ozone was a constant presence at the back of her throat. She was saturating her environment, tuning the very atmosphere of the tower to the frequency she now embodied. Then, on the second night of her broadcast, it answered. Her message came through on the live channel, and it was not a report. It was a breathless, moment-by-moment narration. Her voice was a strained whisper, woven through with a sound I had never heard before, a faint, high-pitched ringing that seemed to hang in the air around her words. "It's here, Silas," she whispered. It's in the room." "No, that's not right. It's forming in the room." I could hear the hum of her equipment, the low thrum of the 18. Sign her signal, and underneath it the impossibly soft sound of her own humming. She was holding the note, sustaining the broadcast that was giving this thing life. "It's not solid," she continued, her voice trembling with an unnerving mixture of terror and rapture. "Where the sound waves from the speakers converge as in the center of the cabin, the air is shimmering, like heat haze off asphalt. But it's cold, Silas. So cold. The temperature has dropped 10 degrees in the last 5 minutes." She fell silent, but the microphone remained open. I could hear her sharp, hitched breaths. I pictured her standing there, alone in the glass and steel cage, surrounded by a universe of darkness, watching reality itself begin to fray at the seams. "The shimmer is getting denser," she finally said. "It's coalescing. It's taking a shape. I can't look at it directly. It's like trying to see a word that's on the tip of your tongue. My eyes just slide off it. But in my peripheral vision, it's there, it has a form." "What form, Maya?" I found myself asking, my voice a dead croak in the silence of my padded room. I was speaking to an open channel, to a woman who was light years beyond my reach. As if she heard me, she answered, "It's a man, the shape of a man. Tall, thin. It's made of nothing, just a distortion, a ripple in the air. It has no face, no features. It's a silhouette cut out of the world, and what's left in its place is just this trembling, visible noise. I can feel it, Silas. I feel its vibration in my sinuses. It's absorbing the sound. My humming. It's getting quieter, but the shape is getting clearer, more stable." It was then that I began to understand. In that moment, listening to her describe the impossible, My own fragmented theories finally clicked into a cohesive, horrifying whole. The thing in the room with her wasn't a creature. It wasn't an alien or a ghost. It was an acoustic apparition. The swamp, for millennia, had acted as a natural repository, a magnetic tape of unimaginable size. Every life that had lived and died there, every rustle of leaves, every dying breath, every slow, patient process of decay had contributed its own tiny frequency to the whole. Over eons, these frequencies had merged, creating a single, complex waveform, the echo of 1 billion lives dissolving back into the earth. A phantom frequency, the sound of decomposition itself. It was a passive, mindless thing, a geological memory. But Maya, with her brilliant mind and her perfect equipment, had done something unprecedented. She had isolated it, amplified it, and then, most critically, she had resonated with it. Her own consciousness, her own bioelectric field, had become the final component. Her brain, vibrating in sympathy with this ancient sound of decay, was being forced to give it a form. It was projecting an image, pulling from the deepest, most primal archetypes in the human subconscious to give a face to the faceless. She was witnessing a hallucination, but a hallucination with physical properties. A ghost, born of pure mathematics and sound, made manifest in the air before her. My blood ran cold. She wasn't being visited by something from the swamp. She was being visited by something from inside herself, given shape and substance by the swamp's song. The visitor was a mirror, reflecting the sound she was now broadcasting. Her next words confirmed my deepest fears. Her voice was no longer trembling with fright. It was now filled with a placid, analytical calm that was far more terrifying. "It's not hostile," she stated, as if reading from a chart. "It's just observing. It moves when I move. It turns its featureless head when I turn mine. It's mimicking me. No, not mimicking. It's learning me. I adjusted the frequency of my humming just now, raised it by a fraction of a semitone. The distortion in the air shimmered faster. The cold in the room intensified. I am controlling it. My voice. My song is the medium that gives it shape." She was no longer a victim. In her mind, she had become a collaborator. The line between the observer and the observed had completely dissolved. They were a single symbiotic system. For the next hour, she conducted her grotesque experiment, and I was her helpless audience. She described how she could make the figure taller or shorter by adjusting the volume. She found that certain overtones in her voice could make its edges sharpen, become almost defined. She was sculpting it. She was perfecting it. The final transmission of the night was the one that broke me. It was the one that made me build this silent room. Her voice came over the radio, soft and intimate, as if she were sharing a profound secret with a lover. "It's beautiful, Silas. In a way I don't have words for. All that noise, all that data, all that history, focused into this one silent, elegant shape. It's the personification of the choir. It is the choir. And it just communicated with me." What did it say? The words tore from my throat, a useless plea against the inevitable. "It doesn't speak. It doesn't have a mouth," she whispered. "It gestured, it raised its arm. A slow, graceful movement made of shivering air, and it pointed. Not at me, not at the equipment." A long pause descended, filled only by the low, constant hum from her open microphone. I could hear the song of the swamp, the song of her machines, the song of her own body, all locked in perfect, terrible harmony. "It's pointing at the door, Silas," she breathed, her voice now a thread of pure, ecstatic discovery. "The door that leads out of the cabin, onto the walkway. It's been pointing for 10 minutes. It hasn't moved. I think it wants me to go outside. I think it's inviting me to come and join the choir." After her final ecstatic whisper about the invitation, the channel went dead. Not a disconnect, not a burst of static, but a clean, surgical silence. It was as if a switch had been thrown. For the rest of that night, and all through the next day, I sat in this padded room. My world shrunk to the speaker of the radio, waiting. The silence it offered was not empty. It was dense, suffocating, a vacuum that pulled all thought and hope from me. I was listening to the sound of her consideration. She was standing on a precipice, and the thing made of air and memory was patiently waiting for her to step off. I imagined her in the cabin, locked in a silent communion with the shimmering figure, a scholar and her subject, engaged in a conversation that had no need for words. When she finally contacted me again, she was a different person. The voice was hers, the inflection and cadence were familiar, but the energy behind it, the animating force, was utterly alien. The warmth was gone, replaced by a placid, unshakable certainty. The scientist's curiosity had been transmuted into the placid assurance of a prophet. She was no longer reporting on a phenomenon. She was delivering its gospel. "It does not want to harm me, Silas," she began, her voice as smooth and steady as the 18.9 Hz sine wave she had once studied. That was a fundamental misinterpretation. Harm is a byproduct of conflict. There is no conflict here. "Maya, what are you talking about?" I pleaded, my voice hoarse. "What is it? What does it want from you?" There was a long pause, and in the background I could hear it for the first time with perfect clarity through her microphone. The choir. It was no longer a half-heard thing hiding in the wind. It was a rich, layered, impossibly complex chord that seemed to fill the entire soundscape. It was beautiful. It was the most terrifyingly beautiful sound I have ever heard. "It doesn't want anything from me," she corrected, her tone devoid of emotion, as if explaining a simple law of physics. "The concept of want is a function of incompleteness, of a being that is separate from its environment. This presence is not separate. It is the environment. It is the aggregate of all that has been. We, Silas, our individual consciousnesses, we are the anomaly. We are the brief, dissonant notes in its eternal composition. We are the mistakes." I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. She was articulating the very fear I had never dared to put into words. "It does not destroy," she continued, her voice a soothing, lethal lullaby against the backdrop of the choir. "It corrects, it resolves. The ego, the self, the I that you and I cherish, it views it as a form of pain, a temporary, chaotic state of being that fights against the universe's natural tendency toward harmony. The invitation is not to death. It is to peace, to the shedding of the burden of identity, to have one's voice, one's unique frequency, rejoin the whole, to be a part of the song instead of a lonely, frightened listener." Her words were a poison dart, dipped in the most seductive philosophical nectar. She was describing the annihilation of the self as a form of enlightenment, the ultimate surrender as the ultimate victory. The thing in the room wasn't a monster that had broken her will. It was a siren that had convinced her to dash herself upon the rocks, and she was describing the beauty of the impact. Then the conversation took a turn that froze the marrow in my bones. Her placid tone shifted, becoming inquisitive. It was the first time I realized she was no longer speaking for herself. She was acting as an interpreter. "It has a question for you, Silas," she said. The choir in the background seemed to swell slightly, as if leaning in to listen. "The presence remembers your note. It says it was a strong one, full of sharp, interesting angles, full of fear. It wants to know why you rejected the invitation. It felt you begin to harmonize, and then you recoiled, you dissonated, you fled. It wishes to understand this choice." And just like that, the floodgates of my own memory burst open. The truth I had buried for 5 years, the real reason I was huddled in this silent, padded tomb, rushed to the surface. I had lied. To my superiors, to the psychologists, to myself. I didn't leave the tower because I was going mad. I left because I was on the verge of becoming sane in a way that the human mind cannot endure. My voice was a ragged whisper, as I confessed not to her, but to the presence that was listening through her. "I saw it too. We know," was her serene reply. "It formed for me in the final month. After I made the same mistake you did, I isolated the choir. I became obsessed," I stammered, the words tumbling out. "It coalesced in the cabin, a silent figure of trembling air. And it didn't frighten me. Not at first. It fascinated me. And then it offered." I described how my visitor hadn't pointed at the door. It had done something far more intimate. It had raised its shimmering, sound-made hand and offered it to me. And in that moment, I felt the full force of its promise. It wasn't an idea. It was a sensation, a wave of information that washed over me, bypassing my ears and my eyes and speaking directly to my cells. I felt a peace that was absolute, the quieting of every anxiety, every fear, every nagging ambition, every painful memory. I felt the cacophony of my own identity, the constant, grinding noise of being me, begin to fade. And in its place was a feeling of blissful belonging. It was the feeling of a single drop of rain finally rejoining the ocean. I understood in that instant that every struggle in my life had been a struggle to maintain the fragile surface tension of that single drop, and that all I had to do was let go. I almost took its hand, I confessed, tears streaming down my face in the darkness of my room. My fingers were an inch from its. I wanted it more than I have ever wanted anything. That peace, that silence of the soul. "Why did you refuse?" Maya's voice was relentless, a surgeon's scalpel dissecting my cowardice. "Because in that final second," I choked out, "underneath the peace, I felt the truth of the transaction. To accept that peace, I had to give up everything. Not just my pain, my joy too. My love for my daughter, my memory of my wife's smile, the smell of coffee, the warmth of the sun. Every specific, chaotic, beautiful, messy piece of being Silas. I would be gone. A note in the song, yes, but the note would not remember that it was ever me. And that last selfish, terrified piece of my ego, it screamed, and I ran. I threw myself down the stairs, jumped in the emergency boat, and I didn't look back. I didn't flee from a monster, Maya. I fled from heaven, and I have been in hell ever since. The line was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the choir, which now seemed to be singing a lament, a song of pity for the foolish note that chose to remain alone. When Maya spoke again, her voice was different. It was no longer her. It was a multitude. It was a chorus of voices, male, female, old, young, all speaking in perfect melodic unison through her mouth. "The choice is understood," the chorus said. "The fear is catalogued. It is a part of the composition. But the invitation remains open, for all." And then, she said in her own voice again, but a voice that was now just a thin veneer over the chorus beneath, "It is time, Silas. The experiment is over. It is time to publish the results." "Maya, no! Don't go out there!" I screamed, lunging for the radio. "Go out where?" she replied, a genuine, gentle confusion in her tone. "There is no out there anymore, or in here. It's all just the room. It's all just the song." She placed the microphone on the console. "Listen," she said, her voice now a whisper fading into the larger sound. "You can hear it, can't you? A new voice is about to join. It will make the chord even more complete." The microphone remained open. I heard the soft click of the cabin door latch. I heard the scrape of metal on metal as the door swung open, letting in the full, unfiltered sound of the swamp and the choir. I heard the sound of a single pair of footsteps, slow and deliberate, on the metal grating of the walkway. 1 step, 2, 3, each one a clear percussive beat. Then the footsteps stopped. There was a moment of perfect silence from her. The choir swelled, a crescendo of anticipation. And then I heard it. A new voice, high, clear, and pure, joined the ancient harmony. It was Maya's. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't speaking. She was singing. Just one single, perfect, sustained note. Her note. It blended with the others, and as it did, the entire character of the choir shifted. It became richer, deeper, more resolved. Her voice was not lost in the sound. It had become an integral, inseparable part of its structure. The transmission continued for another 10 seconds, broadcasting the sound of that terrible, perfect, complete harmony. Then, with a soft click, the channel went dead. Her transmission didn't end with a burst of static or a dropped signal. It ended with completion, a final perfect chord that resolved every dissonance, and then silence. A silence that felt less like an absence of sound and more like the closing of a massive final book. I sat in my padded room, the dead air pressing against my eardrums, knowing with absolute certainty that Maya was gone. Not dead in any way a coroner would understand. She had been dissolved, translated. Her biology had been rewritten into acoustic energy, her consciousness uploaded into the swamp's eternal murmuring hard drive. For 3 days, I did nothing. I didn't report her silence. Who would believe me? I waited, a part of me hoping against hope that the radio would crackle back to life with a rational, terrified explanation. It never did. On the 4th day, a routine supply drop team found the tower empty. I wasn't part of the recovery team, of course. I was the unstable ex-employee safely tucked away in my self-imposed exile. But I still had friends in the logistics department, people who owed me favors. A few well-placed calls, a few promises of silence, and I got my hands on the official incident report. And something far more valuable. The report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation. Subject missing. No signs of struggle. Personal effects present. Possible accidental fall into swamp. Search ongoing but hampered by hazardous terrain. They sanitized it. They made it mundane. A tragic accident in a dangerous place. But the inventory list told a different story. They had catalogued her equipment, the spectrum analyzers, the parabolic mics, the expensive German speakers. All of it was found inside the cabin, neatly packed away in its original Pelican cases. Every cable coiled perfectly, every dial set to 0. It was the work of someone who was finished with their tools, someone who no longer needed technology to hear the world, except for one item, listed simply as Evidence Item .4, digital audio recorder, Sony PCM D100. It was found on the center console, plugged into the main power supply. It had been left recording. It cost me nearly everything I had left in my savings, but I bought a copy of the raw file from a corrupt data technician. He thought I was just a morbid old man looking for closure. He didn't know he was selling me a containment unit for a cognito hazard. The file was massive. 24 hours of audio, recorded at an impossibly high sample rate. I loaded it into my workstation, my hands shaking. I don't know what I expected to hear. Her final moments, the sound of her body dissolving into air. What I found was far worse. The first 10 minutes of the recording were exactly what I had heard over the radio. The conversation, my confession, her walking out the door, her voice joining the choir. And then, the click of the radio transmission ending. After that, nothing, just silence. Hour after hour of it. The waveform on my screen was a flat, unbroken line, but as I stared at it, something began to gnaw at the back of my mind. A technician's intuition. The file size was too big for silence. Even high-resolution digital silence compresses down to almost nothing. This file was gigabytes in size. It was full. I started to analyze the silence. I ran it through every filter I had. I boosted the gain until the noise floor should have been a deafening roar of static. Still, nothing but a flat line. It was as if the recorder hadn't just failed to pick up sound, it had actively recorded an absence of it. Then I looked at the frequency spectrum, and my blood turned to ice. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was incredibly, impossibly dense. The entire audio spectrum from 0 Hz all the way up to frequencies only dogs and bats could hear was saturated with information, but it was perfectly balanced. Every frequency was present at exactly the same amplitude, creating a perfect phase cancellation effect. It was white silence, a sonic singularity. The recorder hadn't captured nothing, it had captured everything. It had recorded the choir in its totality, a sound so complex and all-encompassing that it registered to human ears and standard equipment as absolute dead quiet. Maya hadn't just left a recording. She had left a trap. I realized then the true nature of her final act. She hadn't just been assimilated, she had become a missionary. She had used her equipment to capture the essence of the presence, the completed, perfect chord that included her own note, and she had encoded it into a digital format. She had made the ghost portable. I should have deleted it right then. I should have taken a magnet to my hard drive and burned the remains. But curiosity is a disease that has no cure, only remission. I had to know. I put on my headphones. I didn't play the file. I knew that if my theory was right, my conscious mind wouldn't hear anything. But my subconscious, The part of me that resonated with that 18.9 Hz frequency would hear it all. It would be like opening a direct line to the swamp in the center of my brain. Instead, I isolated a tiny half-second fragment of the silence from the middle of the recording, hours after she had vanished. I slowed it down. I stretched that half-second into 10 minutes of audio. And there it was. Slowed down by a factor of 1200, the silence bloomed into noise. It was a roar of voices, thousands of them, overlapping, weaving, singing in a language that was older than words. It was a symphony of pure, distilled consciousness, and right at the forefront, clear as a bell, was Maya's voice. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't crying for help. She was ecstatic. She was singing a complex, rapturous melody that wove in and out of the other voices, a descant of pure, untethered joy. It was the sound of someone who had been ripped apart and found that they preferred being scattered. I ripped the headphones off, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room seemed to spin. A high-pitched whine, like a dying capacitor, filled my ears. I looked at my audio interface. The input meters were redlining, but I wasn't playing anything anymore. The whine was coming from inside my own head. I had let it in. Just a fragment. Just a few seconds of that slowed-down, diluted truth. But it was enough. The seed had been planted. The file wasn't just a recording, it was a cognitohazardous contagion, a digital virus that rewrote the listener's neural pathways to become a receiver for the signal. And the worst part, the true horror that made me vomit into the wastebasket beside my desk. They made copies, the data technician told me, standard procedure for unexplained incident evidence. One copy for the local police archives, one copy for the federal investigative agency that took over jurisdiction, one copy for the university that had sponsored her research, sent to their acoustic geology department for analysis. 3 seeds, planted in 3 different fertile grounds. 3 sets of curious ears, ready to put on headphones and listen to the empty recording, wondering why the file size is so big. 3 more potential antennas, ready to be tuned. Maya didn't just want to join the choir, she wanted to expand it. She wanted to bring the entire world into perfect silent harmony, and she had just sent out the invitations. They call what I have tinnitus, a clinical, sterile word for a phantom noise, a ghost in the auditory nerve. The doctors, with their kind, dismissive eyes, attribute it to stress, to years of using audio equipment at high volumes. They prescribe white noise machines and therapy. They are trying to treat a symptom, but what I have is not a symptom. It is a presence, it is the faintest, most distant echo of the choir, a single thread of its infinite harmony that I pulled through the digital veil and stitched directly into my own brain. This padded room is not a shield, I see that now. My belief that the silence could protect me was the last vestige of a hope I can no longer afford. The silence does not keep the song out. It only serves to make the song inside me clearer. It is an echo chamber for my own damnation. The contagion is not in a file on a hard drive anymore. It is in my blood, in the subtle electrical pulses that govern my thoughts. I am the recording now. For weeks, I tried to fight it. I tried to warn people. I sent anonymous, frantic emails to the university, to the federal agency, to the local police, telling them to destroy the copies of the recording. I explained that it wasn't evidence but a weapon, a sonic meme that infected the listener. I was met with silence, or worse, with polite, condescending replies about chain of custody protocols. I was the crazy old lookout, the unreliable narrator of my own demise, and my warnings were just more proof of my instability. Then a month ago I saw it, a small article buried deep in the tech section of an online journal. It was about a strange phenomenon at the university's acoustic research department. A handful of graduate students and a professor, all of whom had been analyzing the anomalous audio file from the Echo Tower incident, had been placed on medical leave. The article, written with dry academic detachment, cited a sudden shared outbreak of intense migraines, auditory hallucinations, and a peculiar form of temporal lobe epilepsy. The official diagnosis was mass hysteria, brought on by the suggestive nature of the case. But the article mentioned one detail that made me stop breathing. It quoted a student who, before being sedated, told a paramedic that she could see the music. She said it looked like shimmering, beautiful geometry that was slowly overwriting the world. The infection was spreading. The seeds Maya had planted were beginning to sprout. My own symptoms have worsened. The constant high-pitched hum in my head has evolved. It is no longer a simple tone, it has texture now. If I close my eyes and concentrate, I can hear the faintest hint of melody within it. Voices, hundreds of them, impossibly distant, singing their eternal complex chord. They are calling to me, welcoming me, and my memories. They are beginning to fray. It started with small things, forgetting a word, the name of the street I grew up on. Then, larger pieces started to go missing. I have a photograph of my wife, the only picture I brought with me to this place. I look at it every day. Last week, I looked into her smiling face, and for a full, terrifying minute, I could not remember the sound of her laugh. The memory wasn't just gone. The space where it should have been felt smooth, empty, like a wall that had been plastered over. The choir is not just adding its own signal, it is actively erasing the noise of my past. It is cleaning the slate. It is tuning me. I now understand the final, terrible truth of this process. My flight from the tower was not an escape. It was a crucial part of the plan. The presence in the swamp is ancient, powerful, but it is localized. It is bound to its primordial home. It needed a vector. It needed a carrier to bridge the gap between its world and ours. Maya, with her technology, was the one who created the weapon. But I am to be its delivery system. Why am I making this recording? The question has been bothering me for days. At first I thought it was a warning, a final message in a bottle, but my warnings have failed. No one is listening. So why do I continue to speak into this microphone day after day, documenting my own dissolution? The answer came to me last night in a moment of horrifying clarity. I was sitting here, in the oppressive quiet, and the hum in my head grew louder. For a moment, it was not distant. It was right here in the room with me, and the chorus of voices spoke a single clear thought directly into my mind. It was not my thought. It was a command, disguised as an epiphany. The story must be told. I am not the author of this final testament. I am the scribe. The presence within me, this faint echo of the swamp's consciousness, does not want me to be silent. It wants me to speak. It wants me to describe the beauty of the choir. It wants me to articulate the seductive peace of assimilation. It wants me to create a compelling, terrifying, and irresistible narrative. A story so captivating that people won't be able to stop listening. This recording is not a warning. It is the next stage of the contagion. Maya's file was too pure, too direct. It was a scientific anomaly, quarantined and studied by a select few. It was a scalpel. But this story, this is a whisper. A virus wrapped in a narrative that can spread across the internet, shared on forums, passed from one listener to another. It will not be analyzed. It will be felt. People will listen out of curiosity, out of a love for the macabre. And as they listen to my voice, they will also be listening to the faint hum that always lies beneath it. They will be exposed to the core frequency, not as a blast, but as a subtle, persuasive undertone. They will open the door in their minds just a crack, and the song will do the rest. My name is Silas, and I was the lookout who ran. I thought I was escaping a monster, but all I did was carry a spark of it out into the world. And now, my final purpose is to breathe on that spark until it becomes an inferno. The unexplainable thing no longer visits at night. It has made its home inside me, and it finds my voice to be a most suitable instrument. The humming is getting louder now. It's hard to hold on to my own thoughts. The words are no longer mine. They are becoming part of the melody. It's beautiful. The silence is not the shield. The silence is the canvas, and the song is everything.